My sister slept with my boyfriend and got pregnant. But when my dad died, he disinherited them all and left me $500K, 2 houses, and his company. Now Marcus stalked me and got arrested. I'm 24 years old, I work in digital marketing, and I need to get this story off my chest because what happened over the last 3 years basically destroyed my family and almost destroyed me too. I guess I should start from the beginning, when everything still seemed normal, when I still thought I had a family that supported me and a boyfriend who loved me. How naive I was, honestly. I grew up in a pretty traditional family, one of those where appearances matter more than reality. My mom was always obsessed with everything looking perfect from the outside, with the neighbors thinking we were the ideal family. We had 2 houses, nice cars, vacations every year, all that stuff. I was the oldest daughter. Then came Hannah, who's 2 years younger than me. And then Ella, who's 11 now, but back then was like 8. My dad worked in construction, had his own company, and my mom stayed home but was always getting into everything, organizing dinners, going to church events, that kind of thing. The relationship with Hannah was always complicated. I'm not gonna lie. Since we were little, there was that typical sister rivalry, but over the years it got worse. My mom spoiled her way more. Like, if Hannah wanted something, she got it, and if I asked for the same thing, they'd tell me I was too old or didn't need it. I remember once, I was like 16, Hannah asked for a new iPhone, and they bought it without thinking. And when I asked for one, a few months later because mine was broken, my mom told me I could wait until my birthday. It's those little things that accumulate, you know what I mean? But anyway, I thought it was teenage stuff, and that when we grew up, everything would get better. I met Marcus when I was 22, at a friend's party. He was handsome, charismatic, worked in car sales, and seemed to have everything figured out in his life. We started dating, and at first everything was perfect, like those movie relationships where everything flows naturally after like a year. Together, I felt it was time to formally introduce him to my family. They'd seen him in photos and knew he existed, but he'd never come to a family dinner or anything like that. The first time Marcus came to the house, my mom prepared a huge dinner, like a banquet, because that's how she was. Always going overboard with these things. Hannah was there, obviously, and Ella too, although she was only 8 and basically spent the whole night playing with her tablet. I remember Marcus and Hannah talked quite a bit during dinner. He was asking her about college because she'd just started, and I thought it was nice that they got along. How stupid. Seriously. My mom was fascinated with him. My dad seemed to approve too, and I left that night thinking everything had gone perfectly. After that, Marcus started coming to the house more often. Sometimes I was working and he'd arrive before me, stay chatting with my family, help my dad with things around the house, that kind of stuff. I thought it was great that he was integrating so much, that my family liked him. My mom always told me, "Olivia, you're so lucky with this guy. He's so thoughtful, so polite." And I felt lucky. Honestly, things started to change like 6 months after that first dinner. Marcus became a bit more distant. I don't know. Like, distracted. When I'd ask him if something was wrong, he'd say he was stressed about work, that he had a lot of sales goals to meet. I believed him, obviously, because I trusted him completely. But there were small weird things, like his phone was always face down, or sometimes he'd go out to take calls and when he came back he'd say it was a client. I'm not one of those paranoid people who check their partner's phone, but I started to feel like something didn't add up. One day, I was like 23 at that point, we were at my apartment watching a movie, and Marcus fell asleep on the couch. His phone started vibrating like crazy, like messages one after another, and I thought maybe it was an emergency. I grabbed it to wake him up and show him. And that's when I saw the screen. They were messages from Hannah, my sister Hannah, and they weren't normal sister-in-law messages. They were flirty messages, with emojis and things you definitely shouldn't send to your sister's boyfriend. One said something like, "I can't stop thinking about yesterday," with a blushing face emoji. I froze. I literally felt like the world stopped. I woke Marcus up by shaking him. I was already crying at that point, although I was trying to keep my composure. I showed him the phone and said, "What the hell is this? Explain it to me now." He woke up all confused, and when he saw what I was showing him, he turned pale, like white paper. He tried to grab the phone from me, but I moved away and started reading more messages. There were conversations from weeks, even months, things that clearly indicated something physical had happened between them. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe properly. Marcus started with the typical excuses. that it was a mistake, that it only happened once, that he was confused. Basically, all the shit cheaters say when they get caught. I screamed at him to get out of my apartment, that I never wanted to see him again. He tried to hug me, ask for forgiveness, but I just wanted him gone. And when he finally left, I threw myself on the floor and cried like I hadn't cried in years. But more than the pain over Marcus, what destroyed me most was that Hannah, my own sister, had done this. The next day, I went straight to my parents' house. It was Saturday morning, like 9 a.m., and I arrived furious. I found Hannah calmly eating breakfast in the kitchen, like nothing. My mom was there too, making coffee, and my dad was in the yard mowing the lawn. I asked Hannah if we could talk alone, but she said, "Whatever you have to say it here." So I yelled at her, in front of my mom, that I'd seen the messages between her and Marcus, that I knew they'd been together behind my back. Hannah's reaction was what shocked me most. She didn't cry, didn't apologize, didn't show any kind of remorse. She just shrugged and said something like, "Well, now you know, so what?" My mom just stood there at first saying nothing, processing what she'd just heard. I kept yelling, asking Hannah how she could do this to me, and she just responded with cold things like, "It's not my fault if he preferred me," or, "Maybe you should ask yourself why he looked for someone else." My dad came in when he heard the yelling, and I had to explain everything again. He got furious, but not at Hannah, at Marcus. He was saying that bastard had cheated on his daughter, that he was going to break his face, all those things dads say. But I yelled at him that no, the problem wasn't just Marcus, that Hannah was guilty too, that she knew perfectly well what she was doing. My mom finally spoke and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Olivia, don't exaggerate. These things happen. You're young." As if the fact that we were young justified my sister sleeping with my boyfriend. The argument got horrible. I was crying and yelling. My dad was confused, not knowing who to support. My mom was defending Hannah, saying I was being dramatic, and Hannah just sat there with that I don't care attitude. Finally, my dad said Hannah had to leave the house for a while, that what she'd done was wrong and there needed to be consequences. Hannah went to stay with a friend, or so they said, and I went back to my apartment feeling empty. Like 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks where I didn't talk to anyone in my family, except occasional messages with my dad asking how I was. I blocked Marcus everywhere, deleted his photos, tried to move on with my life even though I felt destroyed. And then I got a call from my mom, crying, saying I needed to come to the house urgently. I thought something had happened to my dad or Ella, so I went immediately. When I arrived, everyone was there, including Hannah and Marcus. I felt my blood boil seeing them together. But before I could say anything, my mom dropped the bomb. Hannah is pregnant. I stood there, unable to process what I'd just heard. Pregnant. With Marcus, my ex-boyfriend, the man I'd planned a future with. Hannah had that triumphant expression on her face, like I did it. I won. Marcus looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. My mom kept talking, saying that now things were different, that there was a baby on the way, that the family had to come together and support Hannah in this difficult time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked them if they were kidding, if they really expected me to support this. And my mom told me to stop being selfish, that this wasn't about me anymore. I told my mom she was crazy if she thought I was going to be part of this, that Hannah had destroyed our relationship and now was going to have a child with my ex-boyfriend and I was supposed to be happy for her. My dad tried to calm me down, but I was too furious. I told them to forget about me, that I didn't want to know anything about any of them, and I left slamming the door. That was the last time I talked to Hannah and my mom for a long time. With my dad, I maintained minimal contact, just messages now and then, and I also talked with Ella because she wasn't to blame for anything, and I didn't want her to think I'd abandoned her. The following months were horrible. I tried to focus on my work, my friends, rebuilding my life. I found out through my cousin, who was the only one in the family I still talked to, that Hannah and Marcus had gotten married. A quick wedding, small, just close family. My cousin told me that my parents told everyone I couldn't go because I was on a work trip, which was obviously a lie, but that's how they handled everything, with lies to look good. Like a year and a half passed when my cousin called me crying. My dad had died, heart attack. He died in the hospital. I didn't even know he was sick. Nobody had told me anything. Turns out he'd had heart problems for months, had several scares. But my mom decided not to tell me because, according to her, I'd chosen to distance myself from the family. I felt devastated, not just because of my dad's death, but because I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye, to be with him in his last moments. I went to the funeral, obviously, even though I didn't want to see anyone. Hannah was there with her baby, a girl about 6 months old, and Marcus too. My mom barely spoke to me, just a cold hug and a, "You came." Ella, my little sister, ran toward me crying and hugged me tight. Ella didn't fully understand everything that had happened. She just knew the family was broken, and our dad had died. The funeral was surreal, everyone acting like we were a normal family, when the truth was it was all just a facade. A few days after the funeral, I had to go to the will reading. I honestly wasn't expecting anything. I thought my dad had probably disinherited me or something after everything that happened. But when the lawyer started reading, I was shocked. My dad had left me 40% of everything, including one of the houses and a big part of the company. He left Ella 30%, my mom 20%, and Hannah only 10%. Hannah's face when she heard that was priceless. She turned red with rage, started yelling that it wasn't fair, that Dad was clearly senile when he made that will. Marcus also started complaining, saying they had a daughter to support, that they needed more money. I just sat there, processing everything. The lawyer also gave me a personal letter my dad had written for me. I read it that same night in my apartment and cried all night. My dad was asking for forgiveness, saying he'd been a coward for not defending me more, for letting my mom and Hannah treat me like that. He explained that he'd known he was sick for months but didn't want to tell me because he didn't want me to feel like I had to come back out of obligation. He told me he loved me, that he'd always been proud of me, and that's why he left me the biggest part of his inheritance, because he knew I'd use it well, and that Hannah would just waste it. He ended the letter telling me not to let anyone make me feel guilty for moving forward with my life. The days after the will reading were a nightmare. Hannah and Marcus started calling me, sending me messages demanding I give up my part of the inheritance, or at least give them part of mine. I told them no, that money and those properties were what my dad wanted to give me, but they wouldn't stop. Marcus sent me long messages saying I was selfish, that they had a daughter to feed, basically trying to make me feel guilty. My mom didn't help either. She'd call me saying I had to think about my niece, about the innocent baby who didn't ask to be born into this situation. I'd respond that I was precisely thinking about her, about Ella, my younger sister, who was also innocent, and Dad had made clear how he wanted to distribute his things, but nothing I said mattered. To them, I was the villain of the story. Things got really scary like 2 weeks after the will reading. I started receiving threatening messages from unknown numbers, things like, "You're going to regret this," or "You're going to pay for this." At first, I thought they were prank calls. But then one night I left work and found all 4 of my car tires slashed, like completely destroyed. I called the police, filed a report, but without evidence of who did it, they couldn't do much. I told my cousin all this, and she told me she'd heard Marcus talking with Hannah about making my life impossible until I gave them the money. My cousin advised me to temporarily move to a hotel while I resolved all the legal stuff with the inheritance, not to tell anyone in the family where I was. I followed her advice and went to a hotel in another part of the city. Only my cousin and my lawyer knew where I was. I was there for like a week, working from the hotel, barely going out. And then one day I found something terrifying at my room door. It was a notebook, like those normal composition notebooks, and inside were detailed notes about me, about my routines, about where I went, what time I left, what clothes I wore. Someone had been following me, watching, taking notes about every move I made. There were dates, times, descriptions of who I talked to, everything. I started shaking, reading it. I felt like I was going to throw up. I called the police immediately and showed them the notebook. I also showed them the threatening messages and told them about the tires. With all that evidence, they could finally do something. My lawyer helped me file for a restraining order against Marcus, because based on what my cousin had told me and the pattern of harassment, everything pointed to him being behind all this. The restraining order was approved and they served it to Marcus at his house. According to my cousin, Hannah went hysterical, screaming that I was exaggerating everything, that they hadn't done anything. But I didn't trust any of them anymore. I was genuinely scared of what they might do. I moved to another hotel, one farther away, and this time literally only my lawyer knew the exact address. Like 3 days passed in that new hotel, when in the middle of the night I heard a commotion, in the hallway. Someone was trying to get into a room, yelling and banging on the door. I thought it was a drunk guest getting the wrong room, but then I heard the hotel staff calling the police. I looked through my door peephole and almost had a heart attack when I saw it was Marcus, trying to get into my old room from the other hotel. Turns out Marcus had managed to find out where I was staying before, probably by following me or I don't know how. And when I moved to the new hotel, he didn't find out and went to the previous one. Luckily, I wasn't there anymore. But he didn't. I know that. The staff saw him acting suspicious, and when he tried to force the door of what he thought was my room, they called the police. They arrested him right there, and since he already had the restraining order against him, the charges were more serious. Marcus spent a night in jail and then got out on bail, but the arrest was enough for Hannah and him to finally understand I was serious about the legal stuff. My lawyer used all this as evidence to speed up the inheritance procedures, arguing I was being harassed and threatened by my family and needed to resolve this quickly for my safety. Finally, after like 2 more months of procedures and papers, everything was resolved. I officially received my part of the inheritance, sold the house I'd gotten because I didn't want to maintain it, and, with that money, plus the company stuff, I was able to buy myself a new apartment in a completely different part of the city. I didn't tell anyone in my family my new address, only my cousin. I knows, and I made her swear she wouldn't tell anyone. The charges against Marcus for the harassment and trying to get into my hotel room progressed. Basically, they gave him probation and more restrictions about approaching me. Hannah tried calling me a few times after all that, leaving me voicemails where sometimes she cried and sometimes she yelled, but never a real apology. My mom never apologized either. In fact, the last time I talked to her, she told me I'd destroyed the family. That because of me, everything was broken. I told her the family destroyed itself when they decided to support Hannah instead of doing the right thing. And I hung up. Now I live in my new apartment, work from home most of the time, and honestly, my life is calmer than it's been in years. I keep in touch with Ella. She's 11 now and comes to visit me every 2 weeks. My mom isn't very happy about that, but legally she can't stop it, and Ella wants to see me. My cousin also visits me often. She's basically my only connection to that side of the family, and that's fine. Sometimes I think about everything that happened and wonder if I could have handled it differently, if I should have forgiven or tried to fix things. But then I remember the notebook with notes about me. I remember Marcus trying to get into my hotel room. I remember Hannah's face when she told me it wasn't her fault if Marcus preferred her. And I know I did the right thing by distancing myself. Not all families deserve second chances, especially when they never asked for forgiveness for the first one. Last week, Ella asked me if I'd ever talk to Mom or Hannah again. I told her the truth, that I didn't know. Probably not. She thought about it for a moment and then told me, "That's okay. I still like coming here with you. Your apartment is nicer and there's always ice cream." I laughed. Because that's Ella, finding the positive in everything. I asked her if anyone at home talked about me, and she said sometimes Mom says bad things, but she doesn't listen. That she knows I'm good because I always treat her well and make her laugh. That's enough for now, I guess. I have Ella. I have my stability. I have my peace. The inheritance money gave me financial security, but more importantly, this whole process gave me clarity about who really matters in my life and who was just there for convenience or appearances. And that clarity, as painful as it was to get, is worth more than any amount of money or any illusion of a perfect family.